Daniel with Driving Dragons, and today I guess I'm going to go ahead and share my thoughts on the whole race and species thing that's going on in the Dungeons and Dragons world. Talk to you on the other side. So, the whole backstory, for those who haven't picked up on it, is Wizards of the Coast announced in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons with their new release and D&D 1 and all that stuff that they are going to change the word race to species when it comes to things like if you're going to be a dwarf or an orc or things of that nature. Now, to me, this is one of the dumbest things. This is just another example of how social activism has completely invaded this hobby, and this is just another tumor in the cancer that is the entitlement culture in tabletop role-playing games, and it's eventually going to lead to even more exodus from games like Dungeons & Dragons as they continue to capitulate to this kind of stuff. So let's start from the more pedantic side of things. It's the wrong word. They are races. They are not species. Now, I look at it kind of from an etymological standpoint on this base. We refer to other races in real life only when we are referring to specifically to sentient beings. That's really where the word race kind of has its hold. Because we're not different species. Humans are not different species. We're all just different humans. But humans, obviously from a scientific standpoint, we're a species. And if you watch like old school sci-fi, you'll see this too, where you get things like in Star Trek, unless they're speaking in a purely scientific or medical sense, they don't say the Klingons as a species. They'll say, the Klingon race. But if they find a new species of plant or animal, they'll say species. Another place you see it in the real world is we don't say there's different races of dog or different races of cat. We say there's different breeds of dog and cat. However, there are different races of human. So you'll see the argument, well, species, if you're different species, you can't breed together and produce fertile offspring. All offspring are sterile if you're different species, like a liger or something. And I think that's an argument that doesn't really kind of fit, because, at least in this case, really what it comes down to me is a sentience thing. You are a different sentient species, or you are a different sentient facet of a similar creature. So, in this case, we say, orcs are a different race, and that's really what they should be, using the words correctly. What's happened is you got a group of activists, which is a minority. It is even in a hobby that tends to skew more socially liberal, like role-playing games. It is still just a minority of people who have any problem with this, the use of the word race, and they're the people who are narcissistic and professionally offended, and they're going to be professionally offended no matter what happens. They're going to find another axe to grind, another thing to go in and make some change to the hobby, and it always makes me laugh because the same people who will have just debased, raunchy sexual encounters in their role-playing game that they essentially hold the rest of the table hostage for are the same people who are going to complain that somehow using the word race to describe orcs is some great slight against real-world racial division or real-world ethnic minorities or whatever you want to say. It's just an outgrowth of that same problem. So this problem's not going away. They're going to change race to species, and they're going to find something else to complain about. But my thoughts on this, first off, it should stay race. You can't capitulate to whiny minorities and the cry bullies. because it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And it's going to continue to alienate players because that thing, all you do is feed that narcissism, teach them that it works. It gets more and more ridiculous, more and more out there. And what's worse is it gives this small subsection of players, this small group. Oh, some of them aren't even consumers. Some of these people don't even play. They're just professional activists. But even that minority, they get the blessing of the company to go out and attack the rest of the player base. When that submission happens, when they bow to that kind of pressure for no reason, it just gives them the mandate to go out and attack the rest of the player base, which is going to do nothing but drive away players. It's something that shouldn't be there. You should not bring your real world activism into the gaming table. And you certainly shouldn't bring it into the gaming community. It's pervasive, it's toxic, and it's destructive. One of the channels that I pointed out is one that everybody should be subscribed to is RPG Elite. He has done a lot of videos about race and diversity and enforced diversity and that sort of thing, racial inclusion and whatnot in tabletop games and in the tabletop gaming community. And he sort of touched on this, and he had a part 2 video of diversity in tabletop games and how this is a bad thing and how this racial push is bad. And he had a very good segment where he flat out comes out and calls it like it is. He says the racists are the people who are pushing this, because this kind of thing is essentially degrading towards these ethnic minorities by saying, you need us to step in and save you from the big, bad, evil people who put race in the player's handbook. We need to save you and step up because you don't have the creativity to find your own representation in this game. We have to force them to use a certain number of pictures of black people, Mexican people, Native American people, whatever, in their artwork. We have to step up and we have to force this down there because you can't do it yourself. And he's very true. He's like, this is an extremely patronizing trend. And what it is it's pure narcissism. It's a group of players who want to stand up and attach their identity and their political activism to the hobby and use it as something that they can stand up and wave their flag and be part of their crew with. And in the end, this is going to lead to a rotting from the inside of the tabletop role-playing game community. It's going to fracture, it's going to split, and you're going to see us going right back in to the good old days where finding a D&D group is not only a nightmare, but you're going and sitting down on a date, and you're like, man, I sure hope she doesn't ask me what I'm doing Saturday night. I mean, I'm going to have to, I'm going to use a euphemism or something because I don't want her running out the door as a nerd playing Dungeons and Dragons on Saturday. We're going to go right back to the social stigmatism of it, where we are fractured little groups of weirdos sitting over there in the corner and, having to defend our hobby not because of us, because we're the regular guys who go out and do our, have our regular job, go to school, play on the football team, whatever we do, and we sit there and we come back and we play Dungeons and Dragons because we enjoy it and it's a creative outlet and it's a fun thing to do with our friends, and it's probably better than a lot of the other things people do with their friends, going out and getting in trouble and doing stupid stuff, that sort of thing, getting hammered, that sort of thing. But we have to contend with a stigma that comes from all these little groups that turn it into their on one hand, it's their weird animal sex fetish plaything at the table, and on the other hand, it's their activist whipping post. It's their flagellant cat of nine tails that they're going to use to beat everybody with. And no, we're not those kind of players. We don't play that kind of D&D. Why do we want to go back to that when we've got it mainstream? And I'll leave with this. I mean, Stranger Things, it's kind of ironic. Stranger Things was a big boon to Dungeons and Dragons. Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast owe a lot of the vast majority of the success of 5th edition to online streams and Stranger Things. That poured gas on this and brought about a renaissance, brought in a ton of new players. I personally think most of them are going to get bored with it and leave when Stranger Things is over. But we're going to have some that stick around. But that was a gift. That was a windfall to Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast. And they're going to squander it. They're going to squander it with stuff like this by having a handful of new players who may not even stick around that long that have turned this into their social whipping post, have turned this into their weapon. They've weaponized the game against the rest of the community. They've already started alienating their old players. And they're going to alienate them further, and then these new players are going to leave, and they're not going to be left with anything. And it's ironic that if you look at the most recent season of Stranger Things, what happens? Lucas is playing on the basketball team. The stigma is there, and he wants to hide from the Hellfire Club, hide from the fact that he plays because of that pressure. And he's a normal, good guy who's been playing since he was a kid, who has this group of friends, none of which are anything spectacular or weird. And we all know it because, we're D&D players and we're watching the show. But that's the reality of what happens when we keep allowing this stuff to happen. It's going to become a niche hobby of a small group of social activists and those few of us who are diehards. And it's going to kill a huge chunk of the community if we keep letting this crap happen. So I don't think in and of itself it's that big a deal. But I think the race species change is just a symptom of the problem. One last thing is where this comes from and why it happens. Companies as a whole have been pushed towards activism, like large corporations. They have been pushed towards activism. The reason they have been pushed towards activism is because most of us don't care and have no teeth. We'll get pissed that they do something stupid, like switch race to species, or have some woke agenda, or try and cram something down our throats. We'll be pissed about it for a few days, whatever. We still like playing with our friends. That stuff isn't going to happen at our table because we're not going to let it, and we'll keep playing. So there's no incentive for the corporations or the companies to listen to that large minority that isn't going to do anything. Then they have this vocal minority that's not only going to show up and try and push boycotts, try and cause problems, try and generate negative press, try and trash them and stuff. They're also going to dig in. They're going to start looking at everything every executive does, every designer does. They're going to try and dig up where they said something that might possibly be slightly considered racist 50 years ago, and they're going to make that a big deal. They're going to try and cancel people. They're going to try and end careers. They're going to do all this stuff up to and including, you might even get to the point where some of them are starting to take merchandise off the shelves and burn it and destroy it, tear stuff up, make it to where retailers don't want to carry it, run the comic book stores out of business, which, that it hurts Hasbro in the small run, but it hurts us as players a lot more. But that's the reason why these companies have to respond to these groups, is because the rest of us don't put our foot down hard enough. So I would say you need to send a message to Wizards of the Coast. Tell them, hey, I'm not getting on board with one D&D. I'm not getting on board with it because you have made it to where the game master, the dungeon master, is the whipping boy for the rest of the community. You have built a system that is designed to entitle the players, and every time you raise that player entitlement, you actually turn the DM into more of a pariah, more of a person who is treated as if he's there at the whim of the players and, should just be grateful that he gets to run a game and he better do what they tell him. We're not buying your system. We're not doing this because you're taking away a large amount of our physical medium so that you can just delete and change stuff whenever you like. We're not doing it because you're giving into these social pressures, not because we agree or disagree with the particular social pressure this time, but because what you're doing is going to continue to spiral out of control. You are listening to people who are professionally outraged and will never be satisfied, and you're going to keep ruining our game by making stupid changes that have no bearing, that all you're doing is ruining the product that we enjoy and putting more pressure in, and you're giving a mandate to a small minority to viciously attack the rest of the player base anywhere they see them and call them the nastiest things on the planet, and you are basically endorsing it by giving into this crap. And we're sick of it. And that's really about the only thing you can do, and hope that it's enough. But that's my thoughts on the entire thing. Tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me how I'm bigoted or whatever in the comment section. Like, share, and subscribe. Even if you hate my guts, go ahead and share it. Get all your buddies to come in and flame my comment section. But I'm going to leave a link to RPG Elite's video. I think he did a very good job of explaining some of these things, in particular from a minority perspective of how patronizing and narcissistic this kind of behavior is that leads to these kind of things. And at the end of the day, we have to start sending a message to Wizards of the Coast and to these other publishers that we're not going to tolerate them turning our hobby into some kind of stupid activist beating stick to piss off the rest of us, and we just got to be done with it, and we got to send them a message before they completely destroy a hobby that we've all loved, some of us since the 1970s, people like me since the 90s. We just got to do what we can on that. See you guys next time.